everyone, I'm Diana Draker, and welcome to my presentation about the technology and interactivity in modern and postmodern Japanese theater. Now, I realize that this was supposed to be a short thesis, in doublespace it's 150 pages, and I didn't intend for it to be that long. It is just a very dense subject, therefore the thesis is as short as it could possibly be while retaining the information. To explore my thesis, I developed a number of research questions. The primary research question I have is, why has multimedia technology in Japan taken such a hold in several theatrical performances? How does it affect the performers and audience? What type of interaction does it result in and/or promote? By looking at specific categories of said technology, specifically projections and robots and those who use them, I plan to address and reach conclusions to these questions. My motivation for looking into this topic was simply my personal fascination with it. This then developed into the research questions I mentioned and has now developed into a full thesis. It is then my hope that the analysis I have done will assist not just future researchers who are also interested in the topic, but potentially future artists as well. Therefore, the significance of the study is to observe and understand why it is in Japan that theater has made use of these new age technologies in innovative ways, and how their interactions, both from the perspective of the performers and audience, affect them. In either case, the inclusion of an artificial actor also forces both those involved and in the production and the audience to rethink traditional theatrical techniques in the wake of the new technology, even if it is only on a subconscious level. My research done on this case study contributes to our body of knowledge because it compiles data and looks at avenues that are largely not discussed. Furthermore, the theories that I have applied have not been discussed at length when looking at this topic. This theoretical framework that I looked at includes thoughts on liveness, taking particular interest in Philip Ostlander's liveness performance in a mediatized culture, the actor network theory presented by Bruno Latour, alongside some light fandom studies work. The reason why these theories attracted me particularly is because of the nature of the non-human subjects. Using these first two theories to discuss the characteristics of and interactions with the non-living beings, and then the light work on fandom studies applies specifically to the artificial idol Hatsune Miku. My methodology for research meant focusing as much as I could on peer review articles. However, they are sparse. I also contacted and communicated directly with two Western practitioners of mediatized theater, two Japanese companies involved with the technology and marketing of holographic celebrities, as well as three Japanese performance companies that use mediatization in performance. However, my thesis does only focus on one of them. The communications with the Japanese companies were in both English and Japanese, although I did need some translation assistance. I did interview some people with general questions on online fan forums, engaging in discussions when someone would answer, and made sure that I received permission from them to use their opinion on Hatsune Miku in my thesis. Some of these participants had also seen a Hatsune Miku concert live and in person. Furthermore, prior to the start of my looking at academic articles, I also went to Japan and wanted to experience firsthand some of the aspects that I'm writing about. For example, I went to see the robot Asimo, and therefore saw the public reactions about it and other robots in the show. I saw Geminoid F to experience the Uncanny Valley firsthand. However, possibly because I was prepared beforehand, I did not find her uncanny. I also went to see a live Gundam show. In this show, the audience was escorted into a dome with no seats, rather there were handrails to hold onto. The show projected onto the dome had the fictional Gundam robots fighting and flying overhead, dwarfing the audience in size. The rumbling of the room gave the impression that these giant robots were truly fighting, while the audience experienced what it must be like to be an average random civilian in that world, through the use of what is essentially 4D technology and presentation. Overall, I used this methodology because it was the best option to expand upon the limited available peer-reviewed studies in this area. With the writing of the thesis, I felt it was best to look at the development of mediatization before delving deep into the specifics of projections, robots, and the Japanese performance groups. This provides a background for the technology involved with the other sections of research. In this background, I found that for a Western perspective, Adolf Appiah's work was instructive. In his own book, he stated that he did not like the idea of media in theater, stating, "The greater number of media necessary for the realization of the work of art, the more elusive is harmony." Ironically, some argue that Appiah's stagecraft innovations laid the groundwork for the type of theater that my thesis discusses. Appia's 3D stages did away with the previously popular 2D painted set, something that was in actuality inevitable due to the invention of controllable electric lighting, which created a 3D actor. It is specifically Appia's lighting techniques that brought about the means to create living projections. These projections could be a literal participatory character or atmospheric in nature, but either way, it is affecting those on stage and the audience watching it. For example, Teiji Furuhashi attested that even though the actors on stage could not be seen by the projections, these projections were still affecting them on a subconscious level. Appia's goal was to break the barriers between the audience and performer. In a modern context, the digital media inclusion in theater could be seen as an extension or natural evolution of this principle, thereby extending a bridge between the audience and actor. In this context, as Auslander's theory of liveness is such an integral part of my thesis, particularly with the chapter involving the Japanese performance groups, I spent a considerable amount of time discussing his concept in my second chapter. To put it briefly, it talks about seeing qualities or aspects of life in the non-human. There is also the idea that live and pre-recorded performances can be symbiotic. By this, the idea is that by integrating elements of both blurs the line that defines what is a live performance. Despite how the pre-recorded part cannot change, the live humans make it so that the show will never be the same 2 nights in a row. While it is true that there is little room for improvisation with a pre-recorded acting partner, it is still possible. Furthermore, it is because of this that some believe the legal definition of a live performance should be challenged to heed to this blurring of the line. With flat-surfaced media in theater, such as projections, there are several aspects involved. In addition to awareness of lighting and the projector itself, there is also the type of screen involved, potential possibilities of virtual reality technology, and 4D film effects. The use of 4D could also be used to be in contact with the audience in an immediate manner. For example, I once talked with Crush the Turtle from Finding Nemo as an animated character, not someone in a costume. And like a live performance, the next group that talked with Crush did not have the same experience as me. While the characters presented through these technologies have interactions that try to convince the viewer and or participant into believing that they are really alive, there is still a kind of disconnect. Relationships are essential to theater, yet the artificial actor cannot fully connect with another. Regardless of how advanced the artificial intelligence is, their emotions are programmed rather than genuine, and they cannot relate to their partner due to not having any similar personal history to draw upon. Therefore, any kind of relationships, arguably both on and off the stage, is simply an act. And yet, that is not entirely the case. Humans perceive liveness in objects, and this is doubly true when said object has an artificial intelligence, or what is suspected to be so. As Sherry Turkle states in her book, Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from One Another, we are at the point of seeing digital objects as both living and machine. For example, in an experiment described in the book, when adults were told to hold Furby toys upside down and the toy exclaimed that it was scared, every single person immediately flipped the toy back up, claiming they weren't really sure why they did so. This proves that while there is no actual life, the perceived liveness in the doll, and by extension artificial actors as well, these characters are alive enough to recognize personality in. A large part of that, in a theatrical sense, is the voiceover behind it. While there is undoubtable movement, it is the convincing voice that brings it all together. It is because of the voice that the artificial actor can be seen as having genuine emotions rather than pre-recorded and or programmed emotions, thereby heightening the liveness of the artificial performer. In regards to projections in theater, in the West, 3 prominent creators come to mind. Timothy Bird, who uses projections to create, in his own words, a living set. Then there's Chris Verdnock, who uses these special effects to break down traditional established theater conventions. Finally, for Western practitioners, I talked about Simon McBurney, who uses projections to not just heighten the experience, but also complement the actors on stage rather than upstaging them. With The Encounter, he used media technology in a way that was essential to the piece and could not have been presented in any other way. An example from Japan comes from Super Danganronpa to the stage Sayonara Zetsubo Gakuen, directed by Fumiya Matsuzaki. The play itself is an adaptation of the second Danganronpa video game, which is a series of games that involves 16 high school students being trapped in a location where the only way to get out is to murder someone and get away with it in a class trial. Within this 2015 production, I would specifically like to highlight Sayaka Kanda's performance of the character Junko Enoshima because it was done entirely with pre-recorded video. Her performance was projected onto the entirety of the back wall, thereby showing her overwhelming power, dwarfing the performers and audience in size. This in turn creates a new type of interaction due to the dramatic size difference. There is another type of technological performance that takes primary hold in Japan, and that is robot theater. When it comes to robotics, it goes hand in hand with the theory of the uncanny valley. As a quick refresher, the uncanny valley is a chart describing when and what we see to be weird and creepy. When something is roughly 50% human, our brains focus on the human similarities and find the object appealing. However, when an entity appears to be roughly 95% human, we feel uneasy because the differences between what is expected and what is seen is unsettling. The triggers for this is not looks alone, but also movement. If the human-like object does not move in the way that we expect, then the brain will perceive it as being uncanny. Now, while there are robots in the vein of animatronics at theme parks and other similar locations, they do not perform or are used for the same purposes as the Japanese robot theater. The primary reason for the existence of robot theater is to study aspects of social interactions in order to advance the robot industry. The idea is that by observing current human-robot relations upon a controlled space, the roboticist will be able to design an artificial intelligence that can produce realistic and natural interactions with a human, such as empathy and conversation branching. Due to how, unlike an animated acting partner projected onto a wall, the robots have a physical being, they are able to make the audience aware of their own bodies. By becoming aware of one's own body, it may provoke questions such as, what constitutes a human being? Mechanical medical implants technically make the individual into a cyborg. So then what happens if these implements are in the brain? It is this line of thinking, whether subconscious or not, that may allow for a stronger blurring between the human and robot, thereby audiences could more easily perceive liveness in the robot actor. Nevertheless, there is a clear hierarchy between humans and objects, with humans obviously at the top. The actor network theory proposes that a network could still function without the need for a human's involvement, even if those involved are entirely non-human objects. The most applicable for this are the robots, as there are professional robots that can do work entirely on their own, albeit programmed by a human to do so. Then as technology stands right now, robot theater can be seen as being similar to puppet theater. There's typically an operator backstage who is handling the robot's commands, similar to a puppeteer. Regardless, it is up to the human performer on stage to essentially breathe life into the artificial actor. Therefore, it is the human actor's job to ensure that the robot's programmed emotions are perceived as being genuine by the audience, or at the very least, convince the audience that the robot is alive enough to care for it. While I briefly looked at the robot play I, Worker, which was directed by Oriza Hirata, I primarily looked at his other robot play, the 2011 production of Sayonara. This play is about a woman dying of cancer and her interactions with her robot caretaker, Geminoid F, who is aptly played by the actual robot. After the woman dies, the robot malfunctions, resulting in its memories being erased. And while the robot is not physically discarded, some believe that when a robot's memories are erased, it is no longer the same robot, therefore equating it to being the same as the original robot being dead. There were mixed reactions to this play, partly due to the depressing subject matter, and partly due to Geminoid F's appearance is largely considered uncanny, and partly due to the stiff acting on the actress Brierly Long's part. However, she defends herself by saying in order to make the robot's performance more believable, she had to underact in her performance. This method did indeed work, as some critics stated that the robot's acting was better than a human's. Ironic, considering that the voiceover was done by the same actress. This play represents the idea of life and death, a theme that I'll be returning to for another Japanese production a little later on. As director Oriza Hirata and actress Brierly Long were able to get such a strong reaction from the audience, it shows that the robot displayed enough liveness to be considered dead and empathized with. The idea is then, if one can empathize with a robot and feel sad when it is dead, then this feeling can make that robot seem more alive. Liveness is also demonstrated in other Japanese performance arts. Therefore, now I will be covering two different Japanese performance groups, the experimental dump type, and the commercial Hatsune Miku. Dump type is a group that was founded by Teiji Furuhashi and his friends, all of whom were frustrated artists from different disciplines. They disliked how modern theater was being done in Japan. They decided to, in Furuhashi's own words, rebel against the commercial theater. They formed under the name dump type because they did not want spoken dialogue to be in their productions. Therefore, such a thing is a rarity for them. They also tend to put on plays that have darker and political messages, which are largely ignored in commercial Japanese theater. Despite how they stated they did not want a hierarchy, Furuhashi was undoubtedly the focal point for the group. In fact, the play SN was meant to be autobiographical for Furuhashi, depicting what it was like to be a homosexual man in Japan while also suffering from AIDS. Dump type uses technology to bring their sets to life, regardless of the risks involved. As their type of theater was a first of its kind, they had to build their own facility in order to make it. This facility being called the Yamaguchi Center for Arts and Media. It is because of this that many critics believe their plays to be futuristic. However, dump type attests that because the themes of their play are from the present, and because the devices they use can easily be bought at stores, their plays must be from the present. These devices are chosen not for being futuristic, but because they are the most appropriate to convey the themes they want. This is seen most prominently in the 1990 play pH. Furuhashi stated that the theme of pH is the direct relationship that humans have with machines. However, it is important to note that he later contradicted himself and said that pH does not have a theme because it is about contemporary life, which in itself does not have a theme. Regardless, the use of modern technology in this play truly brings the stage to life, as seen in the following clip. The main device of the play is that there are two bars that run across the stage at set intervals. The first one runs at a high location and projects images onto the stage below. Such projections include words like New Game and World Order, which hint at a political message, while other imagery tie into a theme of consumerism, which coincides with Furuhashi's note about the play being about contemporary life. However, the lower bar is what gives the set its life and risks to the performers. The lower bar is only about 2 feet above the ground, and as it is constantly going back and forth upon the stage, the performers must get their timing perfect or else they could end up being seriously injured. This is similar to acting with an artificial performer because the humans must go at the machine's pace, therefore must have their timing perfect. Albeit in the situation of acting with an artificial actor, the human's well-being is not in danger, so there's a little wiggle room in that timing. This lower bar becomes an antagonistic character in the play. It even performs an act of violence by knocking chairs down while it runs across the stage. As it is a constant in the play, it may relate to Furuhashi's comment that pH is about the relationship humans have with machines. In this case, it would imply a negative relationship. There is a counter to this though. There is repeated imagery of tennis balls, which are dropped or rolled onto the stage several times over the course of the play. Due to how the landing point is unpredictable, especially in comparison to the moving bars, it brings about an organic aspect into the picture. Now, while the group still exists as a company, they no longer perform, and only performed for a few years after Furuhashi's death, likely due to the loss of their leader. Another reason as to why Dump-type no longer performs is that their success brought about other commercial Japanese companies wanting to include multimedia in their own productions. And while it was not being used in the same way as Dump-type, it still made the company feel as though they no longer had anything to rebel against. This ironic situation mirrors Adolf Appia, who was against media and theater, yet is said to have set the groundwork for it. With commercial theater, the most prominent example of a mediatized performance comes from the virtual idol Hatsune Miku. Hatsune Miku was born from a voice synthesizer program called Vocaloid, being the third and most popular in the line. Vocaloid is a system made to help composers. The users can compose their own songs in the system, which provides a singer, albeit electronic, to perform said songs. Unlike the previous two Vocaloids who were designed to sound like singers, Miku was not. Her notes were recorded by a voice actress instead. Coupled with her character design, she gained immense attention. Despite being a character, she is still a musical instrument, and to make really good sounding songs, users need to essentially do tuning in the program, just like any other musical instrument. Regardless, Miku's popularity has exploded. Sega even created a video game franchise based on the Vocaloid characters in 2009 called Hatsune Miku Project Diva, with the latest iteration releasing in 2016. These games may have helped in creating a connection between the user and the Vocaloid, especially when considering there is an option in the game series to date the Vocaloid characters. While all the Vocaloid characters are essentially blank slates for the user to project onto due to their origins as a music program, the story mode and dating options expand upon their personality. This is to the point where several users want to make songs that are appropriate for the characters. Sega also produces the Hatsune Miku concerts. In these concerts, Miku and friends show up as themselves to perform via projections. The songs and animations for which are ripped right out of the games. While Hatsune Miku is undoubtedly a manufactured being, there are people who see life in her. I am not here to argue whether she is living or not because it is rather obvious that the answer is not. It is the fact that people can see that life is what is interesting. Part of this may come from how Miku displays many of the qualities that are included when trying to define what life is. The 2013 Hatsune Miku opera, The End, that was coincidentally first performed at the Yamaguchi Center for Arts and Media, founded by Dump-type, also brings about the question of life and death. The basic plot of this production is that after the wiping of humanity, Miku is essentially left alone and begins to question her own mortality. There are several images of a real human as well. There is a scene where a projection of hands typing on a keyboard is seen. Should this be interpreted as the play is taking place inside of a computer, then the mouse character in the opera could represent a computer mouse. Should this interpretation be the correct one, then the ending scene where Miku is running across a large number of glass panes could be seen as her trying to get out of the computer. Alternatively, another reason for seeing life in Hatsune Miku is because of the nature of some of her fans, who are largely identified as otaku, which means an obsessive fan who primarily adores Japanese culture. As mentioned, the video games have a dating option, and there does exist a fan game made for virtual reality headsets where the user can experience what it would be like to live with Miku as a wife. While there are likely to be obsessive fans who do fully interpret her to be alive, the majority recognize this is not the case and likely respond to Miku during her concerts just for the fun of it. Furthermore, just as how the video games may affect one's judgment on Miku, pop culture also influences the perception and even design of robots in Japan. For example, the friendly robot Astro Boy has been cited by several to being the reason why they wanted to become a roboticist. There is also a cultural disconnect that may affect this situation. This applies not just to Hatsune Miku and the other Vocaloid, but for other non-living beings like the aforementioned robots. My findings show that traditionally in Japan there is a concept of spirits, and it is not just biological beings who have spirits, but inanimate objects as well. While it is highly unlikely that every single fan still wholeheartedly believes in this concept, The cultural undertones may be a reason as to why it is possible to act as though the robots and Miku have some type of spirit. Furthermore, there is also the demographics in Japan. Robots are expected to become an active part of society. Due to an aging population, robots have been in development for decades in order to take care of the elderly. This, of course, also affects the workplace, which robots are also being integrated into. These robots are not seen as replacing human resources, but are rather a tool to make life easier. Overall, they are a part of everyday thinking in Japan. As technology changes and certain aspects become easier to program, make, and become more readily available, the lesser will become a novelty and be simply regarded as the norm. It is therefore possible that sometime in the future that what is discussed in my thesis today could become another normal occurrence that audience members do not bat an eye at. As Philip Auslander points out in his book, there are audiences that now expect theatrical performances to resemble film and television. In fact, Oriza Hirata has expressed the idea of a species-blind casting, where a robot has equal opportunity to get a role as a human does. Further research in this area could include how art outside of performance have adopted mediatization. Are the purposes the same? What innovations are being applied? Another research angle is a stronger application of how it is used in Western theater and performance. What is being done differently? How can what has been learned through this thesis work on a Western stage considering the cultural differences? At this time, I would like to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you have all been having a great day, will have a fantastic summer, and found my talk interesting today.